I'm your host, Roger Tucker. I'm a native of Newark, New Jersey, and each week I'll be interviewing artists, historians, authors, and other cultural thought leaders to discuss the cultural impact and influence that Newark has had and continues to have on their lives and work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ara Tucker, and I'm thrilled to be hosting What's Newark Got to Do with It? Today's guest is the artist Dominant Dansby.
Wow.
Dominant, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ara. It's nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. I'm really excited to catch up. And because I'm excited, we're going to jump right in, okay?
Okay.
Right? Is there anything in early life, whether a person or a place or a thing you saw, where you thought, I want to be an artist?
Yes, it started with my older brother, to be honest. He used to draw on the wall when I was a child, and he used to draw these caricatures. And I remember when I saw the drawings on a wall, it just popped at me, and it was just this random thing that I didn't see before. It was his own imagination just going, just kind of like him just finding alternatives towards having fun. He really enjoyed having fun. He was always very active, and he had my older sister as his best friend. And I always saw those two together doing things. But then I was always really fascinated by my older brother.
All right. What's the age difference? How old was he when
4
you?
years older than me. My older sister's 3 years older.
Okay.
So they were a year apart in age. So they were really close.
Okay. And when you saw him drawing on the wall, was that something that was that allowed in your house to like draw on the walls?
No, it wasn't. But, my parents were so fascinated by his abilities that he got away with doing that. And he also, they really encouraged him. They were always so lit up when it came to his abilities. And we were all fascinated by him.
And so at some point, the fascination turned into maybe imitation or at least jumping off. Like, when did you become the one who was drawing, maybe not on the walls?
I actually started off not drawing, but playing with Legos. And I found my creativity through the usage of Legos in the beginning, which is around the ages, I would say, 5 years old. When I was 5, my father started buying us these really complicated sets. And I really enjoyed figuring out the sets, looking through the manuals. Some of it was like Star Wars, huge Star Wars spaceships and aircrafts, or just millions of pieces, which I constructed a city. That it started out with that first.
Okay, so Legos. So it sounds like you were staying close to the manual. You were like, making what the manual said. Were there times when you deviated and made your own creations?
Yes, when it came to like the standard sets where it was just lots and lots of pieces, we also had that. And my mother actually took a few videos of me playing with Legos, because she realized I would just sit and be focused on them for a really long time. She thought that was odd for like a 5 or 6 year old to be so focused.
Yeah. When you were in that state of focus, did you experience it as focus, or were you just making stuff?
I experienced it as focus. There was periods I definitely had, when I'm producing work, there's periods where you just push through. It becomes like this muscle where you're trying to challenge yourself, but within the challenge, it becomes a muscle of endurance to see how long you can endure pushing through an idea. And I felt that. I go through that process a lot with my work, where I try to do different processes that require consistency for long duration. And so I'm very familiar with that feeling. And I definitely I can recall feeling that when I was younger. And I was perfectly fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about your process today, because when one looks at your work, it feels like there is definitely focus. There is definitely a manual that you're following in your head. But like, can you walk me through, let's take collage, right? Can you walk
Yes.
me through how one of your collages comes into being?
Well, I have a lot of different ideas in my head about ways to process things. It's all about process for me. Art is in some ways spiritual for me as well. I try to process different collective moves and chains of ideas, and then it just kind of merges together. So it's really just an experimentation of one approach, two approach, three approach, and then mix the three together to see what happens. That's how I see it. It's just these steps.
So if I sort of try to unpack that, are they steps that are like intentional, like you can see moves ahead of time, or is it improvisational?
I can see it in my head ahead of time. What's improvisational is the cause and effects of things, where there's been some steps that I've done, and when gravity takes hold, or when you find out the medium, the glue or the matte medium or whatever medium you're using, how they affect each other, is it. The steps are clear, but how they affect each other is not clear. So that's like the chemistry version of it. We find out about how things pair.
It's like alchemy. It's like
Yes.
yeah. I wonder, I mean, some folks have talked about jazz when they see your work. How does that resonate for you?
Jazz was one of my great influences. The first album I found was Round Midnight from John Coltrane, and no, from Miles Davis, and also Giant Steps from John Coltrane. Those two albums were the first albums I found, and it felt very visceral for me. It felt spiritual. I remember looking at the album covers and looking at the images and feeling this very mysteriousness to the people, and I developed a very strong connection and a strong admiration for their discipline and the process that they were involved in the long, and then it just kept. I kept discovering new artists through one person, through the other person, and I felt a deep connection to how, and a respect and a reverence for their crafts.
The that reverence and the influences, are there artistic influences as well?
Yes, because in some ways, I can understand the minds of the musicians through how they're crafting air, how they're crafting rhythm to create their paintings. And for me, it's not too different than me crafting air and manner in which I create my paintings. So when I'm sculpting, I usually lay things on the floor a lot. I use compression of objects to keep things down from lifting up. But so I see the way I see the space is similar to how I see their music. The space that I craft is not too different than the space they craft through sound.
Do you listen to music when you're working?
Absolutely. Or sometimes while working, sometimes in between. Sometimes I'll focus. I'll watch. I'll listen to podcasts while I'm working. I like to multitask a lot. Um, I do perceive production as a muscle, so I try to get as much work done every day as I can, especially when it comes to really big ideas. Because I feel certain ideas, I've come across ideas that made me want to quit before, and I stopped producing for a while. But then, what it gives back to me is the energy, the inspiration. You feel strong. You feel like you can create your own legacy.
Ooh, I like that. So if you're in the process of creating your own legacy, tell me more about that.
I have so many dreams and visions in my mind about bigger ideas that I have no idea how to approach. I feel like I've only covered 30% of my ideas, and I have so many of them. And I perceive art as culture, and history. And within that, I want to create something that really moves and impacts people and that can reach as many people as possible through the love of life, the love of life, the love of through the wonders and how the wonders of life and how we want to imitate that through some type of process, our experience of life through some type of process.
You've mentioned, sort of the spiritual, the life, as influencing coming into the studio. Do you have a sort of mindfulness practice? Like, how does spirituality or nature, how does that influence either how you work or what you make?
I sometimes meditate in between producing work. Well, not sometimes, every day. I've been meditating since I was 13, and I do that practice of sitting crisscross, and it's a lot of times until my legs hurt, until how the blood in your legs shoot up to your root chakra or other areas of your body. But if you cut off your blood in your legs from sitting crisscross and meditating for too long, your legs start to hurt. That happens to me every day because I work sitting crisscross. So, and the meditation is just to keep my mind mediated, to keep me in a mediated state so that it can sharpen my focus even more.
You talked about, this idea of keeping the materials, compressed and making sure things stay where they need to stay as you're making. How do you decide what kinds of materials to use in the first place?
Well, a lot of materials I use has to do with the environment. It's really just me using what's available within my environment. I realized I worked as an art handler for Mana Contemporary. I worked as an art handler for Gander and White. And in all of those environments, I would use the materials from the throwaway materials from the crate shop. I would use throwaway materials from artists. I would use, when they were emptying out their storage, I would use a lot of materials from photographers. They had a lot of archival cardboard, these blue and gray archival cardboard they would use to cover up photos that were really important. And when they were sending the work to exhibitions, sometimes they would get rid of the cardboards, and I would use that for my art. I would just try to use things that can be well preserved, and strive to and just work with that. So it really is just it narrows the possibilities a little bit, but it also makes it more clear on how to approach the work when you just focus on using what's available.
When you talk about using what's available, I'm reminded of that thing we talked about at the very beginning, your brother using the wall and doing these caricatures.
Right.
I think of what I know, and you can correct me, most of the work, when I think of your work, I think of abstraction, I think of
Yes.
collage. I don't think of figuration. Is that an intentional choice? Have you ever done figurative or representational narrative type painting?
Yes. Particularly when I was in high school and college, but I was really inspired by my because I went to school for illustration. So illustration is very representational. I later discovered that I was more interested in things that wasn't representational through the process of illustration. And ironically, it was the head of the illustration department, Thomas Woodruff, who encouraged us sometimes to do things that were not representational to make a point. What it made me fall in love with abstraction was that the idea of just creating something that didn't exist. I wanted to open people's mind to the idea of looking at something that doesn't exist and just appreciating it for what it is. I noticed that when I went to exhibitions and I talked to people who wasn't as familiar to art, they would focus on that's a tree, that's a person, that's a dog, instead of really looking at the work and really taking it in and understanding it from a more subconscious way or a way which it doesn't have to be based on anything that they're familiar with particularly. I've always tried really hard to get people to connect to things that isn't as representational.
Do you have any abstraction ancestors that you are particularly inspired by?
There were people that I think that the process of me creating, there were people that have artists that I've come across that made me realize that what I was doing was very similar to what a lot of other Black artists were doing. Um, I would say person I work with, Willie Cole, he's one. His work is all based on processes. He's almost like a he's almost like a carpenter in some fashion with his sculptures because he uses tools from plumbers to woodworkers, or he uses the tools of a lot of different trades to craft the structure of a lot of his work. Sometimes it's just to craft the frame of his work before he works on top of it. He uses tools from a lot of different people. And then there's Leonardo Drew, his work. He was actually it's ironically he was actually into animation first. So he was an animator that became a sculptor. And I was in Cartoon Allies when I was a student. So I made comic books, like he made comic books as well. I'm sorry, not animation. He was into comics before he became Leonardo Drew was into comics before he became a sculptor. And when I looked at his work and the depth of his work and how, and the materials he was using and the process of his work, I saw similarities. Uh, um, with there was also Jack Whitten as well. I feel like I came across his work later, but I felt a lot of similarities to our work as well. So I feel, whether I'm conscious of it or not, there's a chain, a conscious chain that is ties us all together. Willie Cole would always say, when you have an idea, and if you don't take the idea is in the air, so someone else will catch it if you don't catch it.
So you're out there catching it.
Yeah, I try to catch it. I'm not the only one. That's the point.
Yep. Yep. No, I hear that there's both community and opportunity to be unique within a lineage. Speaking of, so you talk about, this endurance game, studying and working with other artists. Is there anything that you've had to unlearn as you've become more immersed in your practice or more sort of established in your practice?
That is a good question. I'm certain there are things I had to unlearn. There are, I would say, it's the thing that I've unlearned was a lot of the practices the disciplines that I've poured into illustration. Again, the representational process direction I've went, and that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. But I do note that I haven't been producing that as much. And truthfully, I would like to go back to doing more representational work as well. Because I remember I really enjoyed doing model drawings and taking the woman's form and drapery and looking at it as a form of abstraction and just focusing on excellence in terms of of reproducing the organic shapes and the spatial awareness, and looking at it as an art form similar to jazz, where it's like the raw material, the rawness and the essence, trying to capture the essence of their humanity, but encapsulated in a way which it becomes purely just art. And that will trigger people's mind to see the woman's figure and see the woman in a way in which is cultural, historical, and like a masterpiece.
That's very interesting. when you were talking about that, I was kind of reminded, we're doing the show, What's Newark Got to Do with It?
Yes.
And, the city of Newark, just like you were talking about all of the things that go into a form, right?
Mm-hmm.
It has its own specific visual culture and history. There's jazz,
Yes.
there's community, there's resilience, there's all of that. Do you have a relationship to Newark or Essex County more broadly?
I've really set myself up because I really resonated with being like a hermit. So I really spend a lot of time to myself, but yes, I have many friends I've associated with Newark. At one point when I used to vendor out in New York, I associated with so many people. Newark somewhat, but I never got really immersed into the community outside of the outside art fairs. When I was younger, more so in high school or college, I used to go to the outside art fairs, and I was familiar with a lot of the artists in that area. Especially like Jerry Gant. I've spoken to many times before he passed, and I got to know his personality. My mother knew who he was. There were a few people who were, I met a lot of people then within a younger community who was immersed into the art world. I met a lot of the older people who were immersed into the art world in Newark. I was very much involved, and then I moved on to Brooklyn, and then I started associating with a lot of people in Brooklyn and then Manhattan. When I was vendoring, I was part of the vendoring community there, and I got associated with like so many people across Newark that were just trying to make money through, staging their products outside of the Union Square, So New York and New Jersey, I got really immersed into different communities, and it was a beautiful experience. And it's one of those things that I hold on to dearly when I choose to go more in depthly into myself, into trying to amass bigger, grander projects, because I'm in the verge of trying to produce a bigger project after I finish this book that I've been working on for over a year now. It's like a drawing book I've been working on.
Well, I'm very excited to see that.
Yeah.
And while we wait, the world will get to see you at the Outsider Art Fair coming up
Yes.
later this month. So, I know that as a writer, we're always taught once your work is out there, you can't really be in the reader's ear, right? But let's pretend you can be in the viewer's ears, eyes, body. Is there anything you want someone to take away after standing in front of one of your pieces at the fair?
Well, I think I consider my work to be, I look at the work as like this, I want them to take away the idea that the work is like, it's constructural. It's very constructural, and it's about building. It's about building the energy involved in building a city, the energy involved in constructing things. And that's how I look at the work. Is I look at it as this constructural basis for as human potential. If a person with all the work that a person put into becoming a scientist, if you can visualize what that looks like in a physical form and just have it just be, seen in front of you, I would like to be them to see that in themselves, that, the process of them coming to one point to the other. If they can see what that looks like in physical form for themselves based on their own ideology, I would like them to be able to connect to it in that way.
Awesome. Well, Dominant, I think that's a great way to close. Thank you so much for being here on What's Newark Got to Do with It, and looking forward to seeing your work at the fair and beyond.
Thank you.
Tune in next time for another conversation with our guest who will share their Newark, New Jersey cultural journey. If you'd like to share your Newark, New Jersey story, go to our website and submit your unique journey on our contact page. I'm your host, Roger Tucker. I look forward to sharing these fascinating Newark, New Jersey conversations with you sometime soon. So long and be well.